you've written some really fascinating pieces. Sam and I were talking about it before we started the show. Thank you so much for being on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Uh, why don't we talk about your latest piece, which is Women Are Done with Trump? And I know that was one of the graphics from it. This is interesting because there have been a lot of places where Trump has bled support, but women seem to be a particular problem going into the midterms. Can you talk with us a little bit about what you're seeing in the data?
Yeah. So, normally in the polling and political world, they have this phenomenon that they like to call last in, first out, which is that the newest supporters you pick up are always the first to turn on you
Mm.
when the economy gets bad because they don't really have any attachment to voting for you, right? And that explains why Democrats have, or why Trump has basically lost ground with Hispanics and young people. But women turning on Trump is new because women did not swing heavily against Democrats in the last election, right? They don't stick to this last in, first out theory. In fact, Kamala Harris did significantly better with women, both in terms of swing and absolute margin, than she did in 24. So, what's interesting here, what's unique, is that we are seeing an asymmetric gender backlash again, but at a time when every other pattern indicates that like the backlash is really just proportionate to how much you got quote unquote duped by the president last time.
Mm.
Wow, that's interesting. So, what does that tell you about the midterms? What are we looking at here in terms of that demo?
Yeah, so it's interesting because you know, in elections I can look at a state and I could tell you just within like 30 seconds how Hispanic swung in that state, how white people voted, how black people voted. But I could look at that map for 3 days and I couldn't tell you a single thing about how women voted because they're not geographically spread uniquely, right? So it's not as if Trump getting a backlash with women is going to have like asymmetric effects on the midterms map, right? It's not going to be like, oh, I expect them to now all of a sudden lose Iowa because Iowa has more women than usual. Like, that's not really a thing.
Mm.
But the implications for the midterm do exist in the following ways. Number one, where Democrats run credible female candidates, we do tend to see that female candidates do better with women and there are more women voters. I could theoretically see a small, very small, but a small effect there, right? We're talking less than 1%, but if it's like Alaska with Mary Peltola running, every little bit matters. I could see it helping Democrats with some of the turnout effects, right? Because women tend to vote more than men do, though this really, again, depends a lot on a lot of other factors. But really, when it just comes to the midterms, I think this is best thought of as an explanatory change for why Trump has slid rather than a forecast, right? It shows us who he's lost ground with and what brand of politics is really poisoning the well and with who.
I know the Democrats have really been focused on economic issues, and it seems like the leadership is pretty convinced that kitchen table issues are going to win the day for the midterms. But you looked into the data a little more and found that a lot of female voters, a lot of working class female voters really do care about issues like reproductive rights, and they consider that to be a quote unquote kitchen table issue. Can you talk with us about that? Because that is not something that I have heard debated very much lately.
Well, Susan, I could answer that in a bunch of different ways. So I'm going to try answering it one way, and you tell me if I've answered the question sufficiently, right? I do think leadership is correct from the Democratic side in that kitchen table way issues are the way to move it forward. I do not think that it is going to be that you only have to talk about it because it's never really practical for a politician to only talk about one thing.
Hmm.
Um, I also think that when it comes to kitchen table issues, like the Democrats, the reason that they're talking so much about needing to focus on it is because they started the cycle with an immense deficit in that area, right? And unlike, crime or immigration, where you may have to make substantive policy changes to your platform in order to do anything, on kitchen table issues, you really can just paint yourself as it's us versus them. They're in power. What have you gotten? And we know the Democrats enjoy an edge on healthcare. So between that and the deteriorating economy, it's not really a surprise to me that they've chosen to seize on the kitchen table issues lane. I don't really think that I would look at the kitchen table issues as like, oh, this has disproportionate focus with women, so much as I would just think like it matters with all voters. Because if you're looking at where Democrats are gaining versus where women are disapproving of Trump, there's a huge gap between women who disapprove of Trump and women who plan to vote Democratic,
Mm.
right? And that gap can't necessarily just be bridged by people being mad at the president for the economy. Democrats have to actually do something to sell those women. If it was just kitchen table issues, you would see, I think, that gap starting to close a little bit. I'm not saying Democrats haven't done any work on that. I'm saying that the work they've done is insufficient because that gap is huge, specifically among moderate and among conservative voters. So they're not only are they not buying the economic platform fully that the Democrats have put out, like they hate Trump's, but that's not enough to all vote for Democrats. They're also not convinced, I would say, on some of the cultural issues of Democratic policies.
So, do you think that that means they will hold their nose and vote Republican in the midterms, or are they going to stay home?
I think a good chunk of them are going to stay home. If you disapproved of Trump and you voted for him in 2024, you are like only 75% as likely to turn out as someone who voted for Trump in 24 and now approves of him. There is a notable turnout effect drop. So I think it's three buckets. One group of them is going to stay home. One group of them is going to show up and vote for Democrats. That's like a small group, but it will happen. And then one group will just vote for Republicans. And I would say like you can just split it into those three buckets. And what volumes each bucket has, anyone's guess.
Mm.